I was the #1 tennis player in the world, and I couldn't walk.
Immersive sports science. Content, not commentary. Sports science, not bro science. And in this episode, we talk about the Amazon Prime documentary Resurfacing, which follows Andy Murray as he tries to get fit for the 2019 season, more specifically for the US Open. After his multiple hip surgeries and the medical and sports science reasons and knowledge behind such things, as well as documenting the sports science and medical support for a high-level elite athlete, as well as detailing the strength conditioning and the recovery needed to get back from such surgeries.
This program is brought to you by both Amazon Prime and Amazon Music. See the links down below for more information, but more about them later.
Resurfacing, believe it or not, nothing to do with the building trade, is an Amazon Prime documentary film that tracks the tennis star Andy Murray's devastating injury journey between 2017 and 2019, which sees him go from surgery to rehab to surgery to rehab to playing back to surgery again. Hence the name Resurfacing, which is a type of surgery. It offers an intimate insight into the corners of his home. We live alongside and witness Andy at his most vulnerable. Documentary maker Olivia Capucci catches him after his first hip surgery. From there, we follow him and his sports science team around the world as they prepare to get him back fit again in order for him to play competitively at a high elite level. This film was punctuated with news footage and game footage of him actually playing, although this was done really cinematically, and also elements from his own previous life, as well as a kind of like an Andy Murray vlog of what he was feeling at certain times.
I managed to win my match today against Marius Koppel, 7-6 in the third after 3 hours.
Which kind of helps to distract the viewer, but in a really good way that keeps them focused upon the actual documentary. At the end of the documentary, we in effect see Andy Murray almost saying he's going to resign from tennis because of the resurfacing hip surgery he will need for quality of life, which shows to the viewer a kind of will he, won't he come back to tennis narrative. All of this, like any good sports documentary, had expert opinions or interviews with experts or people who know him specifically well to add more and further insight on Andy Murray. Possibly unsurprisingly, when we look at it, depending on your perspective, that sports science and the medical science took such a prominent role in this film. Something that doesn't quite normally happen in most sports documentaries. Normally the sports science is kind of thrown to the side or is only mentioned in brief passing. It is good in this documentary we get to see the cross-disciplinary relationship and the human-athlete relationship also with their sports science team.
And I don't think all of the time that they appreciate like how difficult it is. Then yeah, when they participate and join in, something always goes wrong.
But different practitioners come with different methods, not all of them useful to the athlete.
Bill Knowles. Ultimately, I see myself as a reconditioning specialist.
Yeah, I went for it. Everything that he asked me to do, although some of it wouldn't be textbook training and textbook method.
Bill Knowles' philosophy is to utilize movement patterns that are similar to that of the sport in which you play.
I began my career studying physical education, qualities that we teach little children to do at young ages. Yet, just because you're a pro athlete doesn't mean you're good at those anymore. Go back to the basics, and oftentimes they forget about their injury and they get into feeling like an athlete again.
Some of Bill Knowles' approaches are, well, questionable at best. What Bill Knowles utilizes is all three domains of sports science in order to rehab their participant. In the rehabilitation process of an athlete, we can often get as a domain sidetracked and focus purely on our own domain rather than that of the needs of the athlete and looking at them holistically as an athlete, as a human being. And psychology can often be ignored from the process during an injury, when it's in fact times like these that sports psychology is necessary to keep the athlete on track, but also to help them for their own well-being and to better their performance, whilst also minimising the time they need rehabbing. Psychology can have an effect upon this. This is because our thoughts and feelings can potentially affect recovery time. This was at complete contrast to John O'Donnell, the surgeon, and Brian English, orthopaedic doctor, and his methods and what he decided to do for Andy Murray's rehab. He wanted full control of rehabilitation in order to do it by the scientific textbook of medical rehabilitation. This is rehabilitation for the average person with that type of hip surgery. It doesn't necessarily factor in the case that Andy Murray is an elite athlete, although these rehabilitation processes are highly applicable to him. And as you can see here, they were specialised and individualised and made bespoke to him.
Brian coming in, his thing was kind of to do his recommended rehab exercises, so a lot of repetitions and multiple times throughout the day.
There is one thing that all the rehabilitation experts can agree on though.
Nobody's pain-free. At a level of stiffness and soreness that is an acceptable part of the journey of a 30-year-old athlete with an injury history, yeah, I think you have that good opportunity.
You know, my job is to try and fulfill my potential and get the most out of myself, and the best way to do that is to, you know, surround yourself with good people and follow, to the most part, what it is that they're getting you to do.
But we've also got to bear in mind that the type of rehabilitation used and strength conditioning used depends on the phase of the injury, whether you're in a phase of surgery or recovering from the surgery, and or the ability of the athlete at that present moment in time.
A labral repair, my ligamentum teres was torn, so I had that removed. Yeah, I mean, I had significant inflammation in my hip as well, which he had sort of scraped out. There was pretty severe cartilage damage in there, but John felt like he'd seen worse.
Andy Murray had a very similar injury to Leah Barry. You can see that interview on the card above on the right hand side. But it could also be stated and argued that the different types of surgery and the different phases of those surgery required different levels and different types of rehabilitation. If you like, his second bout or rounds of surgery was that to do with reducing the pain in the hip joint.
To me, once you get rid of the pain and you get the range back, then it's very much down to the rehab team to work through the phases of rehabilitation.
While his third surgery was a hip replacement, with the aim to improve quality of life over that of sporting performance.
The hip joint is also known as a ball and socket joint, where the ball, femoral head, of the thigh bone fits into the socket, acetabulum, of the pelvis bone. Damage to the hip bones can be treated by hip resurfacing, which is a surgical procedure in which the damaged parts of the femoral head are trimmed and the socket is removed and replaced with metal caps. Hip resurfacing is an alternative to total hip replacement surgery, where both the ball and socket of the hip joint are completely removed and replaced with plastic, metal, or ceramic prosthetics. Your surgeon may recommend hip resurfacing surgery if you suffer from severe hip arthritis affecting your quality of life and the symptoms have not been relieved with conservative treatment options such as medications, injections, and physical therapy. In addition, younger, larger-framed patients with strong and healthy bone are more suitable candidates for hip resurfacing surgery. Easier to revise. Components used in both procedures usually wear out, loosen, or fail after a period of 10 to 20 years, requiring revision surgery. As hip resurfacing involves less removal of bone, the revision surgery should be easier to perform.
The psychology of an athlete can often be neglected during injury rehabilitation. It was initially thought, like the most of mainstream psychology, that we go through phases of anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, recognition, and denial when we are having an injury. However, the research did not show this, and we cannot apply this directly to sports psychology in terms of sports injuries. Injured, many athletes get a sense of learned helplessness. They learn to be worthless. Their worth is based upon the value of them performing at their sport. And if that's not the case, then they are not meeting their identity, because sport is part of their identity. It is them. It's what they do.
I was saying to the guys yesterday, and it seems like a dick thing to say, but I really feel like I don't deserve this. Why is it important? It's just tennis. It's just a sport. But it is for you, but it isn't for me. It's a lot more than that.
What do? As soon as you take your whites off, your value and your brand just falls off the face of a cliff.
Many players fear re-injury. Ironically, they may compensate, which in turn may actually cause another injury. To many athletes, their sport is their escape. It's an escape from all the trauma or from the real world around them. In case of Andy Murray, whose parents were going through a divorce, and he had to face with up to the consequences of the Dunblane massacre, although they didn't really state that much in here, they just kind of alluded to it in the film. Tennis was his escape from that kind of thing. However, it became all-encompassing and a huge part of his identity as well as his personality. You become addicted not necessarily to the pain and the downsides, but to the highs, or the very few highs that you may have in your sport, which may or may never come.
Yeah, ultimately a decision has to come from me. You know, I feel like the decision impacts a lot of people that are around me as well, without trying everything, because, you know, I feel like I deserve, you know, to give my hip that chance. Yeah, I'd want everyone around me to know that I've literally tried to do everything that I could to keep playing. Professional sports is not a long-term career. It's extremely short. I want to be doing it for a lot longer, and it's been stopped because of something that's sort of I can't control. I'm really, really nervous just now. Like really anxious. I've got butterflies. When you're making a decision like that, it's kind of, I would want to feel like my leg is really fucking sore. It's like, fuck, is that the right thing to do?
There was a stage where I was just thinking, oh, I wish I could just get an injury so I can just get 6 months out. That's not a cool place to be.
And, you know, but most likely it is. I'm thinking that I'm fucking making a mistake.
Other than retirement, the show focused upon psychological attitude, perception by others.
Murray, mentally and physically. The negative body language, the negative verbal language, does that get in his way as well?
He's lost his temper, he's lost the plot.
The way he behaves, it's just is not good enough. And he won't win anything.
The way he behaved, was it due to a lack of discipline or a sheer and utter desire to want to win? Likewise, having this ill discipline will prevent you from winning. It can distract the mind from the task in hand.
Yeah, as much as I know, like on the court, I can be a pain and difficult, like in lots of ways. I think I've been easy to work with because I do what I was told, like in training. Like I would, you know, if a coach told me to play for 4 hours, I would play for 4 hours. I might complain about it, but I'd try my best. And like the same thing through the rehab, like however many times, 5 or 6 times, like going through that process, like I've tried my best through the whole process that I feel like I deserved a better outcome.
There was also an interesting section where they showed Andy Murray's preparation to play tennis on the day of his actual match, his preparation for that match. Now, knowing this, there is no one way of actually preparing for something like this on the actual day, pre-match. It's going to be interpersonal, it's going to be different for everybody. Ultimately, it comes down to what works for you personally. And in the case of Andy Murray, it seems like watching the in-betweeners and giving a phone call to his sports psychologist actually helps. Now, if you're British like me, you know that growing up with in-betweeners is practically life education.
You don't just walk up to a girl in a club and introduce yourself. It's creepy. Clubs are different rules, you dick. Look, you dance over near them, make the eyes, then get them to dance with you.
Really?
And talking about products that can be viewed and listened to on Amazon. Amazon Music are currently doing a 93-day trial. Your favourite music? One place. In fact, the music I've utilised in this video comes from Amazon Music. Amazon are also really famous for doing student discounts. In fact, there's even an Amazon Prime student. If you want to know more about these products, find the link down in the description below. Andy Murray Resurfacing is a fly-on-the-wall style format documentary. Like most sports team documentaries. However, this film is very much different. This is not following a genius as such. This is following the graft of one individual and the emotional turmoil they face along the way. The director had to show this within her documentary. This was partly done during interesting camera angles, showing Andy Murray as a highlight, his emotions, his raw feelings, and in the change of the actual format of the documentary, going from this kind of polished fly-on-the-wall style documentary to vlogs, which then helped to show Andy Murray as a human. And although I've cut them out, showing the pauses within the actual speech themselves also makes them seem more human. It's more a natural way of speaking. It seems like it comes more from the heart of the actual athlete, and it's better from a individual to buy into that story if we can buy into that individual and their storyline. If they're more human, they're going to be more relatable. This is something in the past that Andy Murray has struggled with his public perception, being referred to by one newspaper as the first Thunderbird to win Wimbledon, due to the fact he didn't really move his top lip and his very wooden persona upon television. The director was forced to show Andy Murray in a different light. This helped with interesting camera angles, rather than just doing the bog standard action shots like you usually see in documentaries or the sit down talking head documentary style format. These shots weren't just chosen because they looked cool, but actually helped to tell the story.
It's nice. You're like banging trouble here. We've got a Spielberg and Fellini sitting over there.
The sides are so much more open, aren't they?
I always feel like this one feels bigger than all of the others.
Yeah, this feels bigger to me.
That for one moment, and you can talk to your blue in the face, and you ain't going to convince me of that either.
It's a non-ticketed court, so like anyone who buys a ground pass can come in, so you get the proper tennis fans, not just the rich people watching. So the atmosphere on here is much better than on the centre court.
You do work hard, there is no question of that. I think you do get on with people.
On Instagram today, so I'm hoping they put me on this court to play.
I didn't trust you to bring anybody back. You're fired.
But then, yeah, when they participate and join in, something always goes wrong.
Beautiful.
This is just sort of
Centre court Wimbledon, that's adorable.
Suit didn't even have to fucking tell them what it was. I haven't finished it yet, obviously, but you know, I'm getting asked to show my work before it's done. And also, I'm not in a creative space right now. This is not where I do my art. This is I'm sketching for my next piece. Do you think Picasso used to have people filming him do his best work?
Humour and having fun can also show you in a good light, especially with a post-millennial audience who may be or may not be watching this film. Get the impression that the filmmaker's there, not through her presence being on camera, but by the words and actions of those being interviewed.
Very on edge just now. Is that obvious? Are you aware of that?
The programme was really good at showing the medical procedures in all their detail in order to help you understand what is going on. This is a lot better than them trying to explain the actual procedure.
I really want to keep going, but my body is telling me no.
The director was really keen on showing Andy Murray's most emotional moment in order to show a different side to him and to tell the story. The use of transition graphics was minimal and barely used throughout the film, used like a storytelling tool. Furthermore, she was keen on showing Andy Murray in a family setting, in a setting that's not related to tennis in order to show his humane side, his human side, a different side to him, so that you could buy into it. Directed with nuance and sensitivity by Olivia Capucci, this documentary offers a disarming glimpse into Murray's physical toil and the mental conflict that ensued during his darkest hours battling his hip injuries. The scientific aspect of Murray's life and film is ever present, and so it should be with this film, detailing it alongside the athlete's interaction of how a multi or cross-disciplinary team work with professional sports with a high-paying individual athlete. Interestingly, all the sports science of recovery, rehabilitation, retirement, psychology and the invasive treatments coupled with periods of uncertainty, will he or won't he narrative, it is not those that stand out in this film. It is the moments of humanity, the tear-inducing lows and the euphoric highs that spark in the face of adversity. These spark emotions in the viewer. Those are the moments that will move you.
You know, it's an inspiration to other athletes, and it also helps maybe doctors, physios, to have an understanding of how to rehab this injury and how to support athletes when they're going through these tough times.
When I originally had my hip injury, I was out for sort of 5 or 6 months, and then I had an operation in Australia in January of 2018, and thought it might be an interesting thing to do whilst I was whilst I was away from the game, to film some of the rehab and the behind the scenes things that kind of go into getting athletes back on the court. But it turned out quite differently to what any of us expected. So I hope people enjoy it, because it's a little bit more than just kind of a sports film.
I think what's really surprising about it, I mean, it's deeply personal, it's very emotional, it's gruesome in places. And many people will think of you as quite a private person. Yet you show very intimate parts of your life. Why did you want to do it?
If I knew that I was going to go through what I went through like now, and you asked me, would you film a documentary about it, I probably would have said no. But I think that's made it a more interesting watch than what I'd envisaged at the beginning, which might maybe have been interesting to a few sports people.
Unlike films such as Diego Maradona and Senna, Resurfacing isn't the story of a genius. It is the story of a grafter with a painful commitment to hard work. Everything the sport of tennis could throw at his deteriorating body, only to come back as formidable as ever. Its greatest quality is its ability to humanise Murray, which is hard because he has been compared to the first Thunderbird doll to win a tennis Grand Slam. All in all, I give Andy Murray Resurfacing a KSA score of 98.82.
I was the #1 tennis player in the world, and I couldn't walk. I have an option to have another operation.
It's just the question of how much does tennis mean to him and what price does it come at.